I think the future right now is on grain-based functional foods. That's the area that I think we should keep on promoting.
I'm sure that AACC is continuing to play a greater role in the grain-based food industry, in the challenges of food safety, security, food security.
We are embarking on a new journey with every grain that's out there, and we can really make an impact, I believe, both legislatively, scientifically, and just on a global scale to help the nutritional value of grains.
And we're getting a lot more students involved, a lot of younger people involved, and that's the future of the industry, and I think it's exactly the same for AACC.
Welcome to Minneapolis and the 2015 Centennial meeting of AACC International. Now please welcome the president of AACC International, Jerry Downey.
Wow. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all here, and I hope you had an enjoyable evening last night at our opening ceremony. And because there are so many of you here, I presume you didn't enjoy it too much. Well, welcome to the 2015 AACCI International Centennial meeting. I'm really delighted to be here celebrating AACC International's 100th year in the wonderful Mill City of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you to those of you who attended last night's opening centennial celebration. It was a great pleasure to network with you and recognize just how far we've come as an association. To help kick off this exciting centennial meeting, we have a special welcome presentation from Minnesota's United States Senator, Amy Klobuchar.
Hello to all my friends at AACC International's annual conference. I think you know I would much rather be there with you in person, but there's just a few things going on right now, and I'm honored to join you via video. I'd like to congratulate AACC International for 100 years of feeding the world safe, nutritious foods. I'd also like to thank you for hosting this year's conference in Minneapolis, and welcome all visitors to our state. In the words of our state's unofficial poet laureate, Garrison Keillor, Minnesota is a place where all the women are strong, right? All the men are good looking, look around you, and all the serial chemists are above average. Minnesota may be best known as a land of 10,000 lakes, but you could just as easily call us the land of 75,000 farms, and we've long played an important role in keeping the world fed. Last year on National Agricultural Day, I attended the unveiling of Iowa's Norman Borlaug statue at the U.S. Capitol on what would have been his 100th birthday. Borlaug was originally from Iowa, but he graduated from the University of Minnesota, so both states can claim him. Borlaug saw people around the world suffering and used science to spark the Green Revolution and save more than 1 billion people from dying of hunger. Today's farmers and ranchers face challenges just as overwhelming as those Borlaug faced. A global population of more than 7 billion people. 795 million people around the world who don't get enough to eat. Ever-increasing costs that threaten farmers' ability to pass their land on to their children. And of course, the weather. That's always been challenging, but a changing climate makes it more so. These challenges aren't going away. As the world's population grows and more people rise from poverty, so too does your need for food production. It's estimated that we'll need to produce more than twice as much food as we do today to feed 9 billion people in 2050. Making this challenge is going to take all of us, farmers and ranchers, our university, our policymakers, and of course our scientists. It's fitting that you're meeting in Minnesota, not just because AACC is based in Eagan, but also because our state is a center of food production. We're home to some of the biggest companies in the business, Cargill, General Mills. I got a reminder of the important work you're doing last summer when I visited Fafa Foods in Ethiopia, a food processing company for baby food that is one of the first privately owned companies in the country. General Mills and Cargill provided technical expertise and other support to improve their production line and the taste of the baby foods. And Land O'Lakes is working in Tanzania to develop the dairy value chain, which has directly benefited thousands of small farmers and processors. I will never forget my visit to a woman farmer in Ethiopia last summer. She was a widow with 2 children, and they lived in a very remote farm community. She was so proud of her hut. She'd just gotten a solar panel that helped provide electricity so her kids could do their homework at night, and she was also proud of her rows of crops. She showed us how she had learned the techniques to make her tiny farm more productive. She grew everything from corn to teff. She was so very proud. And when we asked this woman, 5 senators that were there, we asked her, this woman, she literally walked an hour and a half every day to get water to bring back to her hut. And we asked her what her biggest challenge was. She looked at us and said, I don't really have any challenges. I'm doing so much better. I am so proud of what I've done for my family. That's inspiration. And that's inspiration because you know what else she said? She looked at us and said, I'm a leader. And she pointed to a chart on the wall that showed that she was a leader of the huts around her to make sure that they had hygienic conditions, to make sure that they were having the well baby care. She was a leader. You are giving her that hope. The power of science keeps the world's people fed. The power of American ingenuity can help that woman in that hut in Africa. Thanks again for the work you're doing. Enjoy the rest of the conference. You deserve it.
Our thanks to Senator Klobuchar for her contribution and good wishes. We will certainly bear her sentiments in mind as we open our doors to the next century. 100 years of cereal grain science is really more than a milestone for AACCI. It's a milestone to be celebrated throughout the scientific community. When we gathered for the first time in 1915 with just a few members, the goal was to form an organization for the advancement of the science as it applied to cereal analysis. Each member felt the need to associate with other chemists interested in the same work, to exchange ideas, and create standard methods. Though our science has advanced significantly since then, our methods remain strong, and we organize for the same purpose. In addition to the methods, the association has broadened to provide definitions to the industry, produce publications for use in laboratories and classrooms, and continues to build an online database of scientific and analytical references. Our membership now consists of more than 2,000 individuals from academia, regulatory agencies, and the private sector, working with everything from milling to microbiology. Our history is only just beginning as we consistently push the boundaries of our science and continue to pursue our goals. Over the last year, we have been engaging our membership through Centennial activities to highlight our past and bring us into the future. Thanks to the wonderful work of our Centennial Planning Committee, our colourful history has been transformed into an online interactive timeline, which includes archived images, product developments, and milestones in the history of our science. Other activities featured in Cereal Foods World included a series of scientific milestone articles on the history of the science behind our divisions. And the Future of Grain Science series traveled around the world to explore the future of grain science in various countries. We have also displayed interviews from our Faces of the Future, discussing how they believe AACCI has benefited them. So make sure to take time to experience this impressive collection, all of which will be on display in the exhibit hall. In addition, during this meeting, we will have several other unique Centennial-themed activities that are sure to offer you a memorable experience. Located in Centennial Lane in the exhibit hall, the Bundy Baking Museum has provided us with a display of traditional baking equipment that will give you a blast from the past. Take your photos next to these unique treasures and share them on social media. We're also hosting all-star grain chefs to show us how the pros create delicious grain-based dishes, and samples will be available. Also in Centennial Lane, the AACCI divisions will have tables where you can learn more about what they are working on and how to get involved. And the foundation will feature several AACCI giants and student awardees who will share how the foundation is fostering engagement. We have added more future-facing presentations to this year's meeting as well, to address the changing landscape that our industry faces. During this session, Jack Aldrich will present The Big Aha, how to future-proof your business against tomorrow's transformational trends today. Tomorrow's plenary speaker, Mahmoud Khan of PepsiCo, will discuss the crucial role grains can play in shaping future food, while Wednesday's plenary speaker, Valerie Lanskefro, will present Distilling Your Message, Communicating Your Science. We would not have been able to put together such a robust program or collection of activities if it weren't for our volunteers. I'd like to take a few moments to thank key committees that gave their time to planning such a thoughtful Centennial year. Thank you to the AACCI Program Planning Committee for putting together a fantastic Centennial meeting program. Please stand to be recognized. Thank you. Thank you also to the AACCI Program Planning Committee for putting together a fantastic Centennial meeting program. Please now stand to be recognized. I would also like to recognize the team behind the creative ongoing Centennial activities and initiatives. Would the Centennial Planning Committee please stand? Come on, please. And finally, a thank you to my fellow members of the AACCI Board of Directors for their dedication over the past year. It has been a privilege to work with all of you, so please too now stand and be recognized. And finally, in recognition of his commitment to AACC International, and in honor of the significant role he has played in our association as a leader who has helped AACCI fulfill its mission, and for his work as President-elect, President, and now Chair of the Board, I'd like to present the President's Scroll to Jan Delcourt. We honor you, Jan, for your dedicated leadership and commitment to the association and cereal sciences.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. Thank you, Jerry. It has been a great experience to work with the board, with the membership, with the whole organization. So, a job done. Now I'm the newest member of the group of AACCI past presidents. And as the newest member of the group, I would like to recognize the past presidents that have come before me and who have helped AACC International to become the association it is today. We have quite an impressive history of talented leaders. For those of you, past presidents, who are here today, please stand. And will everyone please join me in a round of applause after I have read everybody's name. David Hahn, Debbie Rogers, Betty McCleary, Mary Ellen Camere, Stuart Craig, George Lookhart, Jim Dexter, Brendan Donnelly, Barbara Heidolf, Julie Jones, Fred Hegley, Oki Chung, Hamid Faridi, Daryl Metcalf, Bill Atwell, Bruce Stillings, Carl Hasney, Bert Apollonia, David Lineback, Walter Bushhoek, John Nelson, and Ken Gills. Please give them a warm applause. It is now my honor and privilege to present several of this year's distinguished awards. For your information, the biographies of all awardees are available in your program book. I will start with the Alsberg French Schoch Memorial Lectureship Award, which was established in 1965 to honor chemists who have made distinguished contributions to fundamental starch science. AACCI is honored to present this year's award to Kwan Wah Park. Dr. Park is Professor Emeritus at Seoul National University in Korea and a visiting professor at the Institute of Food Science and Technology at the Fuzhou University in China. His research activities have included studies on the mechanism and application of various amylases and glucosyl transferases. Dr. Park, would you come to the front? I now move to the prestigious Thomas Burr Osborne Medal. This medal was established in 1926 to recognize distinguished significant contributions in the field of stereochemistry and the progress of the science. Because this is an important award, the Osborne Medal awardees are also accorded the status of AACCI Fellow. I am very pleased and honored to be able to present this award, this medal this year to Professor Per Oman. Dr. Oman is Professor Emeritus of Plants Product Science in the Department of Food Science at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences in Uppsala, Sweden. He has established methods for the analysis of dietary fiber components in starch and has investigated the health effects of cereal carbohydrates along with developing biomarkers for whole grain wheat and rye intake. Dr. Oman will hold his Osborne address tomorrow at 10:30 in room M100FG at the Convention Center, and I would hope that many of you take the time to attend this lecture. So Per, please come forward. As this is an important award, I also said that Dr. Oman is now a fellow, so I will hand the second plaque to him. He's the only one who gets two. You can take them both. I now move to the category of the fellows. Maybe first a little information. The AACCI International Fellows Program was established in 1985 to honor association members who have made distinguished contributions to the field of serial science and technology in research, industrial achievements, leadership, education, administration, communication, or regulatory affairs, and have been a member for at least 10 years. This year, we're pleased to honor 2 AACCI members. The first fellow is Dr. Jonathan de Vries. Dr. de Vries is a retired senior technical manager of Medallion Laboratories of General Mills. He was active in quality-related analytical work for more than 47 years in nutrition and food safety. Congratulations, Dr. de Vries, and would you please come forward? Our next fellow recipient is Peter Köhler. Dr. Köhler is Vice Director of the German Research Center for Food Chemistry in Freising, Germany, and he teaches food chemistry at the Technische Universität München. He is conducting studies on celiac disease and on the structure and functional properties of wheat gluten and other cereal proteins, as well as on enzymes and surfactants in bread making. Congratulations, Dr. Köhler. I must apologize, I made a mistake. I would like to call Dr. Park back to the front. I didn't know he would also get a plaque, and apparently that's the case, so I apologize. I apologize again. We have a final award today. We'll have more awards in other sessions. But for our final award of this morning, we would like to present this year's William F. Geddes Memorial Award. This award was created in 1961, and it aims to honor the zeal and unselfish industry of an individual member, emphasizing the importance of his or her contributions to the work of the society. This year's recipient will be the 57th person to receive the award, and as you may recall from previous ceremonies, the awardee, as tradition dictates, has no idea whatsoever that they are about to receive this honor. Always a well-kept secret. Let me give you some clues. This person knows how to get physical with testing methods as a member of the Physical Testing Methods Committee. He or she is a teacher by nature. He or she has been a long-standing member of the protein, carbohydrate, and milling and baking divisions. He or she was active on the committee that helped put the Centennial celebration together. He or she is a big Wildcat supporter. He or she has to travel to another country to visit grandchildren. And he or she often does not have to wait in the TSA line at the airport. It is my great honor, it is my great pleasure and privilege to announce that the winner of this year's William F. Geddes Memorial Award is Debbie Rogers.
I'm short. Total surprise. Thank you very much. It is quite an honor to have received this. And all I want to do is encourage the rest of you in this room, keep working. This is a great organization. It's worth putting your energy into. Thanks.
Now please join me in a final round of applause for all of the members who have received awards today in celebration of their impressive accomplishments and their dedication to our science and our association. And as I said earlier, we will announce more awards later on this week in the sessions. Tuesdays, tomorrow's plenary session, the closing session on Wednesday. I now would like to welcome Bill Atwell. Bill is chair of the Centennial Planning Committee, as most of you know, and he will introduce our plenary speaker.
Thank you very much, Jan. I'm happy to be here today to help introduce our first Centennial meeting speaker, Jack Aldrich. The Centennial Planning Committee searched diligently for prominent, forward-thinking, and insightful speakers. We want to provide you with tools to plan for the next 100 years of innovation, and our slate of presenters will give you vision you need to be leaders in the advancement of our science. Jack is a well-recognized author of 11 books, including a number of award-winning bestsellers. He is a frequent speaker on technology, change management, and leadership, and has addressed hundreds of corporations, associations, and nonprofit organizations. He has had television appearances on the Science Channel and the Discovery Channel, and is a frequent guest on major media outlets. Jack is also an ongoing contributor on emerging technologies and future trends for a number of publications. Presenting the big aha, how to future-proof your business against tomorrow's transformational trends today. Please welcome Jack Aldrich to the stage.
Thanks, Bill. So the title of my presentation is The Big Aha, and this is a new book I'm working on, and it's an acronym, and what AHA stands for is awareness, humility, and action. And I submit that those three principles are going to help you future-proof your business, your science against whatever is coming next. But before I go any further, I know one of the most common questions I get is this: well, what do you do, Jack? What does a futurist do? And that's a great question, but rather than tell you what a futurist does, I want to show you what a futurist does. And I suspect a few of you have already seen this video, but I'm going to show it to you again anyways. And what I want you to do is I want you to count the number of times the people in the white shirt pass the basketball. Whomever gets the correct answer will get a signed copy of my book. So does everyone understand what I'm asking? Count the number of times the people in the white shirt pass the ball. Here we go. Okay, how many people counted 15? Anyone count 15? Okay, some of you did. How many people counted 16? Some of you. What about 17 or some other number? Okay. Everyone who said 16, please stand up. 16 is in fact the correct answer. Now remain standing. Unfortunately, I do not have books for all of you. So I have a tie-breaking question, but now only the people who are standing can participate in the tie-breaking question. But whomever I see raise their hand first with the correct answer to this tie-breaking question will get the book. So of the people standing, who could identify all three changes in the video? There were three quite distinct changes. What about two? Okay, what about the most obvious? Who saw the most obvious? Yes, ma'am. The gorilla, congratulations. I will get you the book after the presentation. Could I see a show of hands? How many other people saw the gorilla? So it looks like about 30%, but even those of you who saw the gorilla, there were a few other things that you missed. Those of you who didn't even see the gorilla, well, you missed quite a bit. But let me show you everything that you missed here.
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
So that's the exact same video, and I told you I was going to show you what a futurist does. Look, I gave all of you an incentive to focus on a very specific task. And my guess is in your day-to-day job, you're similarly incented to focus like a laser on whatever your specific area of professional responsibility is. As a futurist, however, I have the luxury of stepping back and looking at the big picture, and the first thing I like to remind my audience is there is, in fact, this 800-pound gorilla in the form of new emerging technologies that's walking right into our lives. It's beating its chest saying, I'm going to transform virtually every aspect of the world around us, but a lot of us don't see it because our attention is focused elsewhere. But beyond that, certain jobs, certain industries in the near future are going to fade away. It's kind of like the person in the black shirt just walking away. It's difficult to see this transformation, but I'm here to tell you it is coming. But beyond that, customer behavior and business models are changing in some really subtle ways. It's like the curtain changing color. It is difficult to see all of this transformation, but this transformation from big to small is in fact going to affect you in some surprising ways. And so during the course of this presentation, I just want to help you see how fast your world is changing. But again, this gets back to the principle of awareness. We have to step back on occasion, just recognize how fast the world is changing. The next thing I want to do in this presentation, I want to help you think a little bit like a futurist. And so who could tell me the mathematical relationship between the numbers up here? 1,000, a million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. Yeah, each one is 1,000 times larger than the next. The reason I tell you this is if a technology or a trend doubles 10 times, it's not 10 times as large, is it? It's 1,000 times as large. That's the power of exponential growth. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1,024. So if something doubles 10 times, it is 1,000 times larger. And I'm going to walk you through some 1,000-fold increases that are coming our way. But before I do that, I just want to walk you through a 1,000-fold increase many of you have lived in the last decade and a half. So to do this, I'm going to see how many of you can recognize this sound from just a decade and a half ago. How many of you recognize that sound? Many of you? Yeah, many of you do. It is a 56K modem. All we have done in the last decade is make bandwidth 1,500-fold faster. And what has that done? Well, that's brought us to the wireless revolution. So powerful is it that farmers over in Africa can now access information that they can use to farm better, to increase the amount of money they're getting. And again, a trend like that doesn't affect you directly, but indirectly it does. But it does, this trend serves to remind us we've lived through 1,000-fold increase just in the last couple of years. Might remind us that we're going to continue to live through some trends. But the powerful thing about exponential growth is it catches a lot of people by surprise. Early on, the doubling looks insignificant, 2, 4, 8, 16. Doesn't look like it's going anywhere terribly fast until suddenly it does. And then the world changes. One of my messages to you is I'm now going to walk you through 10 trends that are about to transform the world. It's computer processing power, it's data storage, it's bandwidth, it's the sequencing of genomes, it's advances in biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, 3D printing, sensor technology, and the collection of data. All of these trends, they're not creeping up linearly. They are about to skyrocket exponentially. So if we really want to think about the future and think about the next 100 years, we have to jump this curve. We have to recognize tomorrow is going to be a decidedly different place than it is today. So from this point forward, I'm now going to introduce you to 10 trends that are going to transform the world. But the thing I want you to all understand is every trend that I'm about to present It's not off in the future. Every trend I'm about to tell you is here today. Your challenge, our challenge, is to understand how each and every one of these is getting exponentially better. So these trends are in no particular order, but I'm going to begin walking you through. The first one is wearable technology. Could I already see how many people already wear a Fitbit, a Fuel Band, or a Jawbone? Could I just see? So it looks like there are about 5-10% of you do it. And my guess is you do it to track your physical behavior. You might also monitor your sleep behavior. But this trend is growing exponentially, and has it ever occurred to you, well, what might the Fitbit 2.0 of the near future look like? We know it's coming quite soon. Here's one particular idea. So I don't know if that is creepy, cool, or a coming sign of the apocalypse, but here's the change we're living through, and I'm not sure most people appreciate it. You and I grew up in a world where we went to the internet, first through the desktop computer. Now we're going to the internet through our smartphones. In the not too distant future, the internet and its information is going to come directly to us. And as it does, this is going to change customer behavior. This is a new bracelet. It's called My Exponome. And what it does is it can detect over 1,000 different chemicals, including pesticides. So is it possible that in the very near future, some consumers, I don't want to say every consumer in a grocery store, is going to be deeply interested in what pesticides and what chemicals are on their food products? And as they have access to this information, the information comes to it, it's going to change their behavior. So again, you might not think that wearable technology is going to affect you, but if it changes their behavior and what they eat and how you have to produce some of those grains, well, then suddenly this technology might be affecting you. The next trend I want to tell you, this is just cool, but I want to make some indirect leaps to your business. How many of you are familiar with additive manufacturing, 3D printing? Let's see a show of hands. This is the physical printing out of objects. Let me just show you this clip.
3D printer is kind of like magic. One minute you have this box on your desk, and the next minute you see an object appearing out of thin air.
So that's pretty impressive, but what you need to understand is a 3D printer just 5 years ago was $10,000. Last year you could buy one for $1,000. The one in this video is available this year for $299. But we're not just printing cheap plastic items. Here is what General Electric, this is a operational aircraft engine part, and all of the components have been 3D printed. So the reason I show you that is, here's how I want you to think about it. Today we produce very sophisticated objects over in Asia or in Europe, and then we put them on ships, we transport them across oceans, we bring them into ports, we put them on trucks, and we deliver them to communities like Minneapolis. Well, in the not too distant future, we're going to be manufacturing very sophisticated objects right here. So what does that mean? Well, suddenly the ships that had been shipping those products might have more space available. So the cost of shipping might go down, which might make exports from certain areas of the country much more viable. But let me just show you how fast 3D printing is moving. Here's what they're doing over in China.
Bosses claim they can build up to 10 complete houses in just one day. The company's been printing homes since February and says customers can also order custom-made homes.
So if we can print homes already today, in this trend as it gets better, might the world change? Might we be able to print low-cost grain storage units for underdeveloped areas of the world? Absolutely. And I want you to go back to that 3D printed aircraft engine part. If we can print aircraft engine parts, could we print milling equipment that is designed specifically for millet or for sorghum in underdeveloped areas of the world? The answer is yes. And as these technologies grow, your world is going to change in some unexpected ways, and you just have to be aware of how fast your world is changing. The next trend I want to tell you about, advances in nanotechnology. It's another trend that has been and will continue to double. And here's how I want you to think about it. 5 years ago, nano-enhanced materials and coatings was a $100 million a year industry globally. And Nissan now has a new nano-coated self-cleaning car, but by 2020, nano-enhanced products and materials are expected to be a $100 billion a year global industry. From 100 million to 100 billion, that's a 1,000-fold increase. So what are some advances that are coming in nanotechnology that might affect you? Well, down in Brazil, they've recently developed a new nano coating that doubles the shelf life of milk. Well, if we can double the shelf life of milk, we can also double with innovative nano-enhanced packaging a whole host of other products. And many of you in the room know how much food goes to waste because it spoils. If packaging can suddenly help address a portion of that problem, well, the world might change. Other advances, I'm sure some of you in this room are actually working on nano encapsulation to try and figure out how to make certain nutrients bioavailable. You're also trying to figure out how to encapsulate nanoparticles to enhance flavor and things like that. It's not approved by regulators yet, but as the trend gets better, could your world change as a result of advances in nanotechnology? The answer is yes. And let me give you another example, an indirect effect. Over at Michigan State, they've recently developed a new nano filter, and here's what it does.
A lot of bad stuff ends up in water. Things like phosphorus, which can make you sick. It's bad for the environment. This is Diamonddale, Michigan, and that is Steve Safferman. That's Steve right there looking into the water. He's trying out a new way to get phosphorus out of water.
So we're using this nano filter to get phosphorus out of the water, but that's not all we're doing. Here's what they then hope to do.
Another cool part to this, the phosphorus that gets taken out gets turned into fertilizer.
So new nanomaterial helps eliminate a problem and might make fertilizer more affordable. That might be a trend some of us need to be aware of. Let me give you another example. This material was just discovered 10 years ago. It's called graphene, and it's only an atom thick. And let me just show you a couple of the things that they think it might be able to allow us to do within the next couple of years. Here's one.
Like electric vehicles. Now you pull into a gas station, well, you'd pull into a charging station, and within a minute, it would charge up your car.
Because graphene has virtually no conductivity, it could allow for electric vehicles to be charged up not in 4 to 8 hours, but in less than 30 seconds, faster than you can refuel your current car. And so, as the number of electric vehicles might increase as a result of this technology, the demand for biofuels might go down, which suddenly might make more crops available for food. Again, I'm not saying that this necessarily will happen, but I want you to understand how technological advances in other areas can affect you in some unexpected ways. But one of the other things we're doing with graphene is the ability to potentially radically lower the cost of desalinization technology is a real possibility. There are researchers out at MIT who think that graphene can be used for that specific purpose. And suddenly, if desalinization technology can become eminently more affordable, what are the geopolitical implications of that? Well, here's just one idea. The blue areas are where we're currently growing wheat in Australia, but if desalinization becomes more affordable, suddenly maybe new areas in Africa, Asia, Africa, in the US suddenly become available. Again, you might not think that graphene is going to affect you, but as a result of these second order effects, your world could change in some profound ways, and we have to be aware of this. The next trend, another 1,000-fold increase that I don't think most people appreciate. The number of robots that are being deployed in agricultural settings in a whole host is doubling. Today there are tens, hundreds of thousands of these robots, but if the number doubles for the next 10 years, and some people believe it will, we're going to go from thousands to millions. Let me just show you where we are today and how sophisticated some of these robots are. So we can pick products right off the vine without damaging them. We can detect when they are the optimum point for picking. Other robots, this little robot is called Rowsphere, and what it does is it rolls down in between rows of crops. It doesn't compact the soil at all, and it can detect the exact amount of water or fertilizer individual stalks need. So this technology, as it gets better and more affordable, suddenly maybe even farmers who can't currently afford that technology might be affording it sooner than a lot of people expect. Of course, many of you are aware that we're already using drones in a lot of agricultural capacities, but I just want to show you this clip to give you a sense of how fast the world of robotics is advancing. Here's what they have planned over in Sweden for self-driven robotic cars in the next 2 years.
Of course, we have the objective in 2017 to actually bring 100 self-driving cars to our customers on real roads here in Gothenburg.
So 100 self-driven cars in 2017, maybe 200 the year after that, 400. Doesn't look like it's going anywhere until suddenly it's a 1,000-fold increase, and maybe even self-driven cars and tractors are suddenly available in parts of the world that none of us had anticipated, and they're being used to dramatically make farmers much more efficient and productive. And to just show you, again, I just want to give people a sense of how fast the world is changing. This is only 12 days ago, but over in China, the world's first self-driving autonomous bus went live. If you don't think these trends are coming, you're just not aware of how fast your world is changing. The sixth trend we need to be aware of, another 1,000-fold increase, only this time we're going to go from millions to billions, and that's the number of computer chips, sensor technology, RFID chips we're going to start embedding in our physical world. And here is the number plotted out. Again, it's that exponential curve. We're going to go from hundreds of millions to 50 billion by 2020. By 2030, it's estimated that there might be 1 trillion objects connected to the internet. And let me just give you an idea of some of the odd things we're already connecting to the internet. Some innovative farmers are already putting sensors in their bales of hay. And why are they doing this? Well, these low-cost sensors can detect the moisture level in the bales of hay. And once a farmer knows what the moisture level is, there's an optimum percentage for moisture where it makes good feed. And so they're using that sensor to find out more information about that bale of hay to increase their productivity. But of course, that's not the only thing that we might be able to do. Any of you who work for General Mills, just a couple of weeks ago, there were 1.8 million boxes of Cheerios recalled. Why? Because they had been contaminated with gluten. Well, if we had sensors everywhere in the factory, we would have been able to detect that earlier and prevent that problem from ever happening in the first place. So my message to you is, again, this trend is going to affect all of us in some unexpected ways. The seventh trend we need to be aware of, another 1,000-fold increase, and this is gene sequencing, DNA sequencing. Here's how I want you to think of this, and I know that many of you have lived through it, but I don't think you really appreciate it. 8 years ago, this fellow, his name is Craig Venter, he said, hey, I want to sequence my genome for health purposes. Well, 8 years ago, that cost him $150 million. He was a billionaire, so he could afford it. It wasn't, but that's not very practical, is it? But gene sequencing technology has been getting better every 4 months. So the corollary has been the price has been cut in half every 4 months. And if you cut $150 million in half, starting in January of 2007, something absolutely remarkable happens. By the end of last year, 2014, the price had dropped to $1,000. Today, just 9 months later, $250. But hold on to your hats, by 2020, it's going to be more expensive for you to flush your toilet than it is to sequence your genes. That is extraordinary. What cost $150 million 8 years ago is going to be pennies in a couple of years? Yes. And that's going to have profound implications on healthcare and our understanding of healthcare. And so suddenly people might actually have a real good understanding of why they are lactose intolerant, gluten intolerant, other things like that. But of course, this technology is getting so good that we're not, and we haven't just been sequencing human genomes. Down in Georgia, they've genetically modified corn, 503 bushels per acre. And I know that there are a lot of public concerns about genetically modified organisms, but if we have to feed billions of new mouths, and we are going to have to, well, that's a technology that the public might want to be aware of. Many of you are familiar that because of low-cost DNA sequencing, we have been able to bring kerns of this super wheat, perennial super wheat, back, and they're growing it at the Land Institute in Kansas, but they're also looking at perennial sorghum, other things like this. My point is, some of these low-cost technologies are bringing some of these products to market maybe faster than a lot of us expect, and we just have to be aware of how fast our world can change. And here's another reason our world can change faster than expected, and this is the 8th trend, another 1,000-fold increase we are about to live through, and this is computer processing power. And some of you in the United States might remember 4 years ago IBM pitted its supercomputer Watson on a popular game show called Jeopardy. And it really required the computer to answer some clever questions, but the computer beat the all-time human champion without any problem. Well, all Watson has done in the last 4 years has gotten close to 1,000 times faster. So here's how I want you to think about this trend. Is 4 years ago, Watson was capable of 70 trillion calculations per second. I could not wrap my head around 70 trillion. So I called up the head of a supercomputer center here in Minnesota, and I said, say, I'm writing an article. Could you help me put 70 trillion calculations in some sort of perspective? And being a university professor, and no offense to those of you who are university professors, he said to me, no, I can't do that for you, Jack. And he hung up on me. But to his credit, he called me back a while later and he said, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm approaching 50. He said, okay, so when you were at university, all you had was a handheld calculator. I go, yes, that's all I had. He said, okay, if you needed to do 70 trillion calculations and all you had was that handheld calculator from 30 years ago, he said it would only, and he used the word only, he said, it would only take you 60 million years to do what this machine does in 1 second. That's a little humbling, but all Watson and other supercomputers have done in the last handful of years is gotten 1,000 times faster. One of the reasons I tell you this is because I think one of the reasons why otherwise brilliant scientific, technical, and engineering folks sometimes miss the future is they fail to appreciate even our tools are getting exponentially more powerful. How can we sequence genes ever faster? How can we generate and produce the next killer nanomaterial? Well, we can simulate them on some of these super powerful tools. And these tools are facilitating the future, and they might bring the future to us faster than some of us expect. And let me just show you how supercomputers, and Watson specifically, are now being employed in an agricultural capacity.
It's not just better weather forecasts, it's really trying to connect that to the farm processes. So for example, with irrigation, the system is all set up to put the water down in areas that are known to need it tomorrow and won't be wasted because of rain.
So as we put millions of sensors, even in farm fields, how are we going to process all of that information? How are we going to connect it with the information that we're getting from satellites? Well, you know what? You and I don't have to necessarily do that. Watson and other supercomputing tools are going to help make ourselves and farmers vastly more efficient because they're going to help us make sense of all of the data that these sensors are taking in. But of course, the computer revolution isn't going to stop here. Here's just another way I want you to think about this. Could I just see a show of hands? Does anyone still have on their possession the now tragically outdated iPhone 4S? Anyone still have that in their pocket? Yeah, there are a few of you, and there's absolutely no reason to feel any shame. It's only 2.5 years old, right? But when it came out just 2.5 years ago, the latest, greatest advance on your iPhone 4S was what? Can you remember? It was Siri. It was artificial intelligence. Suddenly, you could ask your phone a question and it gave you an answer. And it did a pretty good job, but it still makes a few silly mistakes. But what we have to appreciate is Siri, Google now, its successors, are going to get 1,000 times faster and maybe 1,000 times smarter. So what does this mean? Well, here's what it means. I think we're going to go from a world where we ask our phones questions to a world where our phones know us so well that they begin telling us things that we need to know before we even know to ask the question. And if you don't believe that, watch this example. It comes from healthcare, but I really think it points to where the future is headed.
What could this tell me about impending trouble?
Well, we're working on a project that will take a nanosensor in the bloodstream that is smaller than a grain of sand, and it will pick up a signal when you have cells that are coming off, shed from into the bloodstream, coming off from the artery lining, which is a precursor to a heart attack. And then you will get on your phone a special heart attack ringtone.
Woohoo! A special heart attack ringtone. I do not know about you, but if I get a heart attack ringtone, I'm quite likely to have a heart attack. But my point with this video clip is this. First, the fellow in this video, his name is Dr. Eric Topol, and his understanding of advances in nanotechnology, computer processing power, and sensor technology tell him that that idea of a heart attack ringtone, it's not way off in the far future. It's just a couple of years away. But I love this idea of using technology, the convergence of these technologies, to begin to know our customers, our clients, so well that we can begin helping them solve problems before they even know they have problems. From my perspective, that is where the future is headed. So I'm not yet done with all of the trends, but I do just want to make this a little interactive, and given the size of the audience, this is going to be a little difficult. But what I want each table to do is now to, first, all of you just take a moment and think about the trends that I have just mentioned and try and prioritize them in your mind. Which ones do you think are most important to you and your business? Think about that. And then just take, in the interest of time, you're only going to have a couple of minutes to do this, but with your table mates, talk amongst yourselves which ones you think are most important. And I know that 3 minutes is not nearly enough to discuss these, but one of my hopes is over the course of this entire event, I hope you'll come back to this issue and talk with your fellow colleagues and peers about these trends and which ones you think you need to be paying more attention to. So just take a couple of minutes and talk amongst yourselves on which trends you think are most important to your business and the science you're doing today. Okay, if I could have everyone's attention. Again, I know that there's so much more all of you can and will be talking about, and again, it is my hope and expectation that over the course of the next few days, you'll continue to talk with one another and people at other tables about these important issues. But now I want to focus again. The title of this presentation was The Big Aha. So the first A was awareness. We just have to be aware of how fast our world is changing. But now we also need humility, and this is the H in the Big Aha. Humility to the idea that what served us well yesterday might not be sufficient moving forward, especially in a world that is changing as fast as ours. And let me just give you one example of what I mean by humility. So as soon as you recognize what is wrong with this playing card, raise your hand. Don't shout out the answer, just there's something really wrong with this picture. As soon as you spot it, raise your hand. In the interest of time, Bill, tell me what it is. That's right, spades are black. Hopefully, the lighting might make that a little difficult, but this one is red. The reason I tell you this is it takes most people, 95% of all people, it takes about a minute to process that. But here's what's curious. If I happen to come up to you before this session and asked you the question, would you recognize a red spade? Most people quite confidently go, oh yes, I would recognize that instantly. But as many of you, most of you saw, that's not what happens. And here's why. When our way of viewing the world has been so conditioned to see something one way, we've always seen spades as black. So powerful is that old idea that even when the new change is staring us in the face, it doesn't process. My message and the metaphor to you is your world, our world, it's already changed, and it is as odd as a red spade, and we need to be aware of the extraordinary changes that we are living through today because they're already here, but they're only going to grow faster. And let me just look at one of the trends I didn't even mention, I suspect it came up at more than a few tables, is how many of you are already familiar with the extraordinary advances that are taking place in gene editing with CRISPR and TALEN? Could I just see a show of hands? This is, I love this quote. In 2012, so just a handful of years ago, there were 2 articles citing this game-changing technology. And essentially, for any of you who are not familiar with it, this is your homework assignment. Rather than me telling you, you find out what CRISPR is and what its implications are. But the number of scientific citations over the last couple of years has been growing exponentially. And I don't have the numbers for 2015, but everything that I have read has told me that a whole host of other people are figuring out how to utilize this game-changing technology. And let me just give you one example. Over in China, they have used CRISPR to remove a gene that is responsible for powdery mildew. So maybe that is a trend a lot of you in the industry are going to have to be aware of. But let me stick with this idea of humility. Let me give you another example. Could I just see a show of hands? How many of you, most of us are familiar with this corporate logo. Could I just see a show of hands? How many of you have ever spotted the shape in the logo? There's a very distinct shape, and usually it's about 5%. And someone tell me what it is? It's the arrow, that's right. And if you can't see the arrow, I cannot help you. No, I'm just kidding, I can. There it is in green. It has always been there, but a lot of us just haven't seen it. And I want to relate this to another trend that has been here, but a lot of us just haven't seen it. And that is, but it's only going to grow more powerful, and that is data, specifically big data. The amount of data we are collecting through our smartphones, through our sensors, through our social media is skyrocketing. But like those other exponential trends, we're just at the lower left-hand part of the curve today. Where all of this data is going to come to us, we're going to start seeing, we're going to come to new insights that were always there, but we couldn't see them, much like that arrow, because we didn't have the tools. And some of you might be familiar, here's just one way I want you to think about this. The question you should be asking yourself is, why has Land O'Lakes and Monsanto spent, over the last 18 months, $1 billion to buy satellite companies? Well, it's because they're not just seed companies or cooperatives. They're data companies, and they want to use that data. Monsanto not only bought Climate Corps for $1 billion, this is another company called 640 Labs. It's a cloud-based agricultural company that is using sensors and cloud computing to help farmers become vastly more productive. And the advances that are coming in precision agriculture and prescriptive planting, from my perspective, are going to be nothing short of phenomenal in the coming years. And here's how I want you to think about both precision ag and prescriptive planting. Today we use both of those terms and they're unique. But here's how I want you to think about this. Many of you might remember 50 years ago when color TVs were brand new, we advertised them as color TVs because they were quite distinct from black and white TVs. But over time, all TVs just were assumed to be color, and we dropped the word color. And I think that exact same phenomenon is going to happen with precision ag and prescriptive planting. In the near future, even if small farmers aren't engaged in precision ag, they're just going to be involved in ag. That precision is going to disappear. And if they're not involved in precision ag, they're not going to be involved in agriculture. And I think that exact same thing with prescriptive planting. And this is the idea, and this is what Monsanto and Land O'Lakes and a whole host of other companies are really interested in, is they want to figure out exactly when you plant that seed, at what depth, and what the spacing is, and how many inputs have to be put on that particular seed in order to increase yield. And we are going to come to some extraordinary insights, and our ability to increase yield as a result of these new tools is going to be phenomenal. In the interest of time, I'm just going to go over a couple of these videos. But here's another question, and I want to relate this question back to this idea of humility, and it's just a metaphor. If I were to ask you, what is the tallest mountain in the world? I want you to just think of an answer. And my guess is the majority of you are thinking, well, it's Mount Everest. Some of you might be saying K2. Anyone know what the tallest mountain is in the world? It's Mauna Kea in Hawaii. We don't think of it as the tallest, but from its base to its summit, it's 3,000 feet. So 4,000 feet taller than Everest. We don't think of it as the tallest because 3/4 of it is underwater. And to me, this is the metaphor for humility. Look, we know that scientific and technical knowledge is estimated to be doubling every 5 years. So here's what this means. Everything that we know today in our scientific and technological fields, as impressive as it is, will represent just that tip above the water in 10 years. In 5 years, we're going to know twice as much. 10 years after that, we're going to know 4 times as much. Is it just possible that this new yet undiscovered scientific and technical knowledge, which we haven't yet uncovered, but we will in the coming decade, might allow us to think about some of our scientific and technical fields in a different light? And the answer is yes. But the question is, will we have enough humility to accept the idea that there might be some really powerful new insights in this yet to be uncovered fields? And let me just give you some fields where I think we're just at the early stages of the game. How many of you are already working with microbials and microbial science? So some of you know, would you agree with this assessment that we're just at the early stages? Do you think we're going to come to some really powerful new insights in the coming decade? And might this allow us to increase yields and rethink how we use fertilizers and pesticides? From my perspective, the answer is yes. And let me just give you one example, and I'm not promoting this company, but here's one company who's already doing some innovative things.
Imagine if we could convert the air, which is 79% nitrogen, and use that nitrogen in the atmosphere to feed crops. That's what azotic is.
So what if if we can use microbials to pull nitrogen from the air to feed crops? That might have an impact on us, and some of these advances might be here sooner rather than later. Here's another area of, and I want to stick with this idea of humility, but I'm going to do this in a slightly different way, because I'm going to show you this little clip, and then I'm going to show it to you, ask you a question, then I'll tell you why I'm showing it to you. So what I want you to do in this clip is I want you to look at it closely and then tell me which way you see the dancer spinning. Could I see, how many of you see her spinning clockwise, going that way? Just raise your hand, okay? How many of you see her spinning counterclockwise? So some of you. How many of you have actually been able to see her spin both directions? This is a mind-blowing idea. She is actually spinning both directions at the same time. And in my case, it took me 5 weeks to see this. Every day I would go back to the website. I'm like, nope, I just see her spinning one way. And my guess is most of you see the dancer spinning one way. It's going to drive you crazy. But I'm going to help you scratch this intellectual itch. And here's how I'm going to do it. Here in the West, we have a saying that if something looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck, right? And hopefully you will all see a duck there, but what else do you see? A rabbit, that's right. And if you can't see a rabbit, instead of imagining a duck's bill, think of those as ears, and then the creature is looking off the other way. Hopefully all of you can now toggle back and forth. 1 second it's a duck, the next it's a rabbit. It is not the picture that's changing, it's your brain that's changing. The neurons in your brain are firing in a different way. And that's exactly what is happening with the spinning dancer. So why do I show you these optical illusions? Well, the reason I show you this is because I think one of the great ways to future-proof ourselves against the future is to learn how to embrace ambiguity. Frequently, we like to think the world is black or white. She's spinning this way or that way. It's a duck or a rabbit. But sometimes, many times, the future is going to be very ambiguous. And the more we can embrace ambiguity, the more likely we are to keep our minds open and come to new insights that might fundamentally change the world. And I want to relate this, not so much, I don't think, for this audience. My guess is, as scientists, most of you are firmly in the camp that GMOs are positive and the science is quite compelling. And I actually share that belief, but we do have to have some humility. And here's how I want to relate it. Some of you are familiar with, we've now added a gene from barley to a particular strain of rice. And what this has now allowed us to do is we can now redirect all of that carbon dioxide that had been going into the soil now into the stem. So methane, which is contributing to climate change, plummets as a result of this, and the rice itself becomes much more, the yield increases dramatically. And I hope I put this slide next. Oh, I didn't, but I'll come up to it next, is that as we have to deal with climate change and feed billions of new people, might the science of these advances allow some current opponents to begin re-seeing this issue in a new light? Can we get them to embrace some ambiguity, to say, you might have some concerns, but help the broader public see the extraordinary benefits of many of the advances you're working on? So now I just want to take another couple of minutes, and I want you to talk with your table mates just about a couple of items where you're willing to challenge some of your existing assumptions about your field, your science, your business. How might you keep an open mind to the future? In the interest of time, I'm only going to give you about 2 minutes to do this, but talk amongst yourselves about some areas where you're going to revisit some of your assumptions. Or there's nothing. You're just all going to keep on doing what you're doing. Okay, if I could have your attention again. As I said earlier, I hope that this is yet another topic of conversation over cocktails this evening, dinner, and throughout the remainder of the conference. But now I want to begin wrapping up. And to do this, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up. And I want to see how close all of you have been paying attention to me and my presentation. And if you have arthritis, you are exempt from this little exercise. But if you don't, you have to do it. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch me as closely as possible and do exactly as I do, okay? Everyone, put your hands up. Put your hands out a little bit, okay? Clap them together. Flip them over. Everyone take your right hand, put it over your left. Everyone, this is your right hand. Okay, very good. Now, if you're sufficiently flexible, lock those fingers together, okay? Now that you have done that, I want you to lower your hands. If you're more dexterous, and I want you to tap your index fingers together, okay? So do you all promise you are watching? Because if you are all watching closely, every single person in this room should be able to quickly, simply, and elegantly rotate their fingers 180 degrees to the top like a gun. How many of you could quickly do that? So your fingers are just like this. How many of you can do that? Or are most of you somehow suspiciously locked up? And you'd have to go, I see that there are a few people who've got it right, but everyone, have a seat. I'm going to show you what just happened there. But if you were locked up, I want you to acknowledge that clearly I did something of which you were not aware. And you should have some humility to the idea that even though you thought you were watching closely, you missed something. Now, as I said, I'm going to show you the trick because I know if I don't, half of you are going to be under the table for the next couple of minutes like, how did that guy do that? So here's the trick, and then I'm going to tell you why I show it to you. But here's the trick, and you can go back and you can do this with your colleagues when you get back. You say, watch me as closely as possible and do exactly as I do. Everyone, put your hands up, put your hands out, clap your hands together. Flip your hands over. Everyone take your right hand, put it over your left. Everyone does that right, but you might remember I acted as though someone in the audience did it wrong. And I said, no, 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 your right hand. And my guess is as I was doing that, most of you followed that hand. As you were following that hand with your eyes, I used the opportunity to flip my other hand the other way, which allowed me to do that. But if you don't see it, you end up locked up. So why do I show you this? Well, here's why I show it to you. If there is one thing, there's one thing I know for certain as a futurist, and it is this. It is after I leave here today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, your field, your science is going to change again. But if you don't become aware of these changes, what's going to happen? You're going to end up locked up, inflexible in your thinking, and you might miss the future. But if you do become aware of these changes, you're going to be flexible, adaptable enough to steer yourself, your research, your company, your organization into the future. So the action, and this is the final A in the big aha I need everyone to take, is to take an entire week on an annual basis just to think about the future. I can already hear what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, who do you think you are to tell me I have to take a week to think? Don't you understand how busy I am? I do understand how busy you are. But if you're saying you don't have a week to think about the future, you're also saying you don't have 2% of your time to think about the future. In a world that is changing as fast as ours, if you're not thinking about the future, I don't know who is. And I get that a week might be a lot, but if that's too much, take an hour a week, take 12 minutes a day. I don't care what it is, but step away from your regular area of responsibility and research to read, think, and reflect on some of these other areas, because it is in these other areas that your world could take some unexpected turns. And let me just give you some things that we all need to be thinking about. To me, this was extraordinary. Just last week, to very little fanfare, the UN announced that they were upping their projections for world population in the year 2050 from 9 billion to almost 10 billion. It's another billion people. Is that something we all need to be thinking about? Absolutely. I know you've already been thinking about feeding the 9 billion people by 2050. Well, now we have at least another 700 million mouths for you to think about. So that's something for us to think about. I've not even talked about advances in RNA interference and the using of the spray technology to silence genes. That might be something some of us should be thinking about. How many people are actually working on this field? Could I just see a show of hands? So there are a handful of you, and my guess is hopefully you would agree that maybe more people should be thinking about the extraordinary possibilities that this technology represents. Marker-assisted breeding, we've been doing it for years, but again, some extraordinary new possibilities are coming online. That might be something more of us should be thinking about. But here's one I just want you, I think we should all be thinking about. Google has said they're working on something called Project Loon. And what it is they're using high-altitude balloons, and they want to deliver high-speed internet access to all 7 billion people on the planet by 2020. Might help you to understand that 2 billion people have access to the internet today. What happens in a world where suddenly 5 billion more people have low-cost mobile devices and have access to the world's information? That might be something some of us should be thinking about and what the implications are for global development. But then we're also making, this is North America's first truly net zero energy building. We're making extraordinary advances in renewable energy, solar energy, fuel cell technology, advanced battery storage technology. But then maybe we should be thinking about how some of these trends are going to come together. If we have 7 billion people with access to the internet, and now maybe many people all across the globe have access to cheap, clean, and affordable energy, suddenly that huge dark spot on the continent of Africa, if we have renewable energy, and if the hundreds of millions of people in those areas have access to information, can we develop that area of the world to feed the world? That might be something some of us should be thinking about, because the world is going to change in some powerful ways. So the question, I'm going to end quite quickly, but the question I want all of you thinking about, in addition to the previous two that I gave you over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, is, okay, you're now aware that the world is changing. You have some humility to doing things different. The question is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do differently? Where are you going to take some action? Is that, and the reason I have this is, let me just end on this note, and I'm going to try and tie together these principles of awareness, humility, and action, and I'm going to do it in the form of another question. And I'm going to give away another copy of my book to whoever gets this question right. Let's say, for the sake of argument, it is the first day in November, and I want all of you to picture a little pond the size of this ballroom, okay? And so, here's the question. And there's a single lily pad on this pond, and it's perfectly sized. The lily pad is actually quite tiny, so that if it doubles every day in November, so on the 2nd there would be 2, the next day we'd go to 4, the day after that we'd go to 8, then 16, 32, 64, you get the idea. It keeps on doubling, and then on the last day of November, the entire pond is covered with these lily pads. Can everyone kind of picture that progression? So here's the question. I'm going to give the book to whoever gets the answer within 1%. On day 20, so 2/3 of the way through this doubling exercise, how much of the pond would be covered with lily pads? I want all of you to just think of an answer right now in your head. Think of your head, and then let me start hearing some answers. And I'll give it to whoever gets within 1%. 69, no, I heard it quite, so my guess is a lot of people, it's fairly high, 25, 50, 69%. But I heard it over here. Who said 0.1? Yeah, I will give the book to the gentleman in the back. The answer is 1/10 of 1%. And this really surprises a lot of people, because they say, what do you mean? For the last hour, you were telling me how fast all of these trends were doubling, and you said the lily pad was doubling, but it only covers 1/10 of 1%? Yes. In fact, this is exactly what I'm trying to convey. Because what else did I say? If something doubles, 10 times, and that's exactly what will happen from day 20 to day 30. How much bigger does it get as a result of exponential growth? 2, 4, 8, 16, 1,000. So even though it's been doubling, it only covers 1/10. But here's what happens over the next 10 days. By day 25, we're a little over 3%. By day 29, we finally get to 50. But once we get to 50, boom, the whole thing is covered. Why do I show you this? Well, I suspect some of you are thinking to yourself, well, Mr. Future Man, if the world is changing as fast as you say it is, how come my world feels pretty much the same? My message to you is all of these trends have, in fact, been doubling. What you have to appreciate, we're just at day 20. The really big change is just ahead of us. That is the world we need to be aware of. This amount of change demands humility, and it also requires that we take action. So I know I've just dropped a really big bomb on some of you, and you're probably wishing it was already cocktail hour, but I want to give you hope, optimism, and confidence that you're going to be able to handle this future. And you know why I'm so confident? Because you've already done it. I proved it a little bit earlier at the start of my presentation with the 56K modem, more than 1,000-fold increase. We seem to be handling that advance pretty quickly. But here's another way I want you to think of it. Some of you might remember this movie from 25 years ago. To show this guy was a super wealthy person in this movie, they showed him using this device. It was that brick-like cell phone. And 25 years ago, that was the Motorola Dynatec 8000X, cost $5,000, belonged to less than 0.1% of the global population. All that has happened in the last 25 years is like that lily pad. Those devices have exploded out, and they have transformed the world around us. So much so that farmers all across the world have incredibly powerful tools and access to information, and they're going to start using those tools to feed the world. But at the end of the day, let me just make it clear. As a futurist, I don't claim to predict the future, but there's a wonderful quote from Peter Drucker, who's a management expert. And decades ago, he said, the only way to predict the future is to create it yourself. The one thing I do know is these tools, trends, technologies, they are real. But the world and the future is only going to be created in your hands. And over the last 100 years, you've already figured out how to feed the world, and I'm absolutely confident by 2050, you are going to figure out how to continue to feed those 10 billion mouths. So thank you for everything you do, and thank you for having me.
So thank you, Jack, for a very insightful and at the same time entertaining presentation. I hope you all enjoyed that. I know I did. So let's just, before we wind up, take a moment to view some highlights of today's meeting activities.
Here are your Centennial Meetings daily top 5 highlights. Number 5, cheer on your favorite up-and-coming scientist at the Student Product Development Competition, as students share their innovative ideas in a grain-based food product development competition. Number 4, don't miss a great opportunity to ask students and poster authors about their research at the Poster Viewing with Authors in the exhibit hall. Number 3, explore Centennial Lane in the center of the action in our expanded exhibit hall. Stop by the membership area to find out how to get more involved with AACCI. Learn about the foundation and how you can support young scientists. Check in with your scientific division. Browse the AACCI Press bookstore or marvel at vintage baking equipment and memorabilia on loan from the Bundy Baking Museum. Number 2, attend the grand opening exhibition in the exhibit hall where you can network with colleagues, view posters, visit exhibitors, sample grain-based recipes prepared by all-star chefs, and enjoy a free lunch. Number 1, take advantage of the expanded scientific program, including hot topic and deep dive sessions with dynamic presentations from innovative researchers and industry leaders. There are lots of opportunities for you to be involved in this year's 2015 Centennial Meeting of AACC International.
So, thank you everybody for coming along this morning and attending our opening session. I look forward to spending the next few days with you to celebrate the 100 years of cereal science that are behind us, but also, as Jack was saying, seeing how we can influence the future and begin to address some of those problems that are looming over the horizon. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.